So you know where to get your information. By the way, guys, if you got nothing on your desk, please put something on your desk to take notes with. It's easy to take notes with your laptop or if it is something you write with, that's fine. Something on your desk to take notes with. If you need some paper, I'll hook you up. That being said, guys, I have provided feedback to everybody about your LinkedIn profiles. You will find that feedback in Canvas. If you log into Canvas, you'll get your grade, and you'll also get whatever feedback I have left for you. I am giving you to the 5th to make changes to your profile and to get back to me with an email that says, I made the changes, check out my profile. The biggest mistakes people were making, people were using default settings on their URL, their web address. Change your web address to something catchy. Some of the other big mistakes are grammar and spelling errors. That happens. That's why we're editing this stuff. When you see the feedback I leave for you, if you have questions about it, email me, see me in class, come see me regardless. I want you to get a perfect score on this. There's no reason everybody in here can't get a 10 out of 10. Guys, the 5 environments of business, if you have not yet submitted this assignment, you have till 4 o'clock today to do so I don't have to give you 0 on the assignment. And our next assignment is going to be due on Valentine's Day, the economic systems exercise, which we're going to be covering in class. If you haven't done it, don't worry about it. We're covering it yet, and we have some time on this one. Any questions about that stuff, guys? In terms of the LinkedIn stuff, I know that setting the URL can be challenging. It sometimes takes people a few clicks to find it. If you're having trouble, hit me up. If you're having trouble finding the feedback, hit me up after class. I'll show you how to get to it. Any questions, guys? In addition to the Super Bowl, what else is going on this weekend? There is the Puppy Bowl, and I am talking about something involving animals, something tied into Pennsylvania. It's Groundhog Day, guys. And so we're starting off today with a little video for anybody holiday. Guys, this is big business. The entire town of Punxsutawney relies on this basically for most of their income. All their tourism is based around this groundhog. The kids will get a day off of school. If the holiday falls during the week, they actually close the schools because they use the buses for transportation. Has anybody here actually been to Groundhog Day? Because it's a weekend, I'm not kidding you, there will be 20,000 to 30,000 people gathered on a hillside waiting for a rodent to be coerced out of his hole. And this year, PETA actually was getting on the Groundhog Society saying that it was an abuse of animals and they wanted an animatronic groundhog. I say PETA doesn't know what they're talking about. Punxsutawney Phil is part of our culture here. So anyway, happy Groundhog's Day to all of you. Hope you celebrate. Guys, we left off on Wednesday talking about economic systems. Let's get back in the vibe here. We're talking about capitalism. This side of the room. Will somebody tell me something about capitalism? Yes, sir. It's a free market. What does that mean? Absolutely correct. So we got limited government intervention. We can start businesses. That's a positive. This side of the room, give me a negative of capitalism. What's something that's not great about capitalism? Or could be perceived as a negative? Help me out. Yes, sir.
People let greed drive us.
So greed can drive us. So we got a free market. We can be as successful as we want, but greed can drive us. Now let's compare that. We're going to start on this side of the room. We're talking about socialism. Can somebody on this side of the room tell me anything about socialism? What's different about socialism versus capitalism? Sir?
The government has like a strict control on what can be traded and control on social things.
So we're talking more government intervention, which for business maybe isn't such a good thing. People can own small businesses, but big businesses tend to be more government controlled. This side of the room, is there a positive about socialism? Is there a positive? What's a positive about socialist economic systems? Yes?
Usually there's like free healthcare.
Lots of benefits. We have lots of benefits. We can rely on the government to take care of us. The socialism aspect is kind of the middle ground. We get to the other ultimate extreme, we're talking about communism. Can somebody tell me, in the world right now, when we talk about communism, what's the country we talk about? Yes? China's a great example. And is there another one as well?
North Korea.
North Korea, absolutely. One more pure communist country. Is there one out there?
Is Russia a pretty communist country?
Used to be communist. They're actually, depending on who you talk to, they're a free market economy, but they used to be communist. Yes? Vietnam, definitely still a communist country. Is there anybody else who would be considered to be communist? Think of a country very close to us. Yes? I'm sorry? Cuba, yeah, that's absolutely correct. Cuba is absolutely correct, and you can actually swim from Cuba to the United States if you're a really amazing swimmer. There's also one of the times we came closest to going to atomic warfare was during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. Communism basically means the government controls everything. In a capitalist or free market economy, guys, how do we determine if we're a company of how much product to make? How do we determine how much to make and what to sell? You got it. Consumer is king in this economy. In a socialist economy, you still have consumers. And they determine some of the supply and demand. If you're in a communist country, who determines how much of something we're going to make? You got it. And the government has no need for competition because you got one supply for everything. So communist countries are not doing well. Let me give you an example. Is anybody here into cars? Anybody a car person? I love cars. If you go to Cuba, you can find perfectly maintained 1950s American automobiles. Here's the reason why. When Cuba became a communist country, and all of a sudden we had an embargo against Cuba, they didn't have manufacturing capabilities to make their own cars. So the American cars they had there, they've had to maintain since the 1950s. Almost nobody in Cuba has access to the internet. Almost nobody in Cuba owns a business. Almost nobody in Cuba can do anything the government says you can't do. And as a result, their economy is not doing well. They rely on subsistence from other communist countries such as China to make ends meet. So really, when we're talking about the extreme, we're talking about countries that have no need to compete and no ability really to compete either. And guys, what I'm going to be asking you to do today, we are going to start our own car company, and we're going to do it in each of these economies. We're going to break up by group. We're going to have group 1, we're going to be our capitalists. Group 2, we're going to be our socialists. Group 3 are going to be communists. And group 4 can pick their economic system. So we're going to start over here with Sebastian. You're number 1, sir. Ones are going to gather up here. The 2s are going to gather over here. 3s in the rear left. 4s in the rear right. And what I'm going to be asking you to do is to tell me what kind of car you're going to make and what. And I'll be around to give you some guys. Guys, what kind of car are you making and why?
We're making a mid-size sedan, four-door, because we feel as though that applies to not like the higher end of our market, and also like towards the lower end a little bit.
Okay. Class with like good MVG, hybrid.
Yeah, we got a couple of this. We got heated seats, GPS, back camera, of course. We got the camera on the top that shows exactly where you are.
Love it, love it. What's our price point? What are we selling these for?
We selling this for $35.
That's a
I was
good
thinking
deal.
that's what I was thinking too.
That's a really good deal. The average price of a new car in the United States is over $30,000. You guys are right in the sweet spot. I heard you talking about colors and stuff too.
Colors. We have our basic colors, black, white, silver, gray, red, things like that. And then we have a website where you can also customize the color that you want for your car, but you just want to pay $1,000 for a customized color.
I'll do it, man. So it sounds like you guys are trying to be, I'm going to say, competitive in the marketplace. Why is that, guys? Why are you taking that approach?
If you're competitive, you won't make money.
Yeah, it's a capitalist economy. You got to appeal, man. I love it. You guys come up with a catchy name. You got a good product here, man. Let's go to our socialist group over here. We have Socialist Motors here, group 2. Tell us a little bit about your car.
Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a giant van with a bunch of seats and like no features or anything, no amenities, because we're socialists and that costs money. So,
What color is it going to come in?
like khaki or
Oh,
something.
fantastic.
Beautiful.
Khaki. Keep going.
Or something like that.
Sirius XM, can I get satellite radio?
No,
Oh, okay. Well, this is going to be a low-cost car, right?
somewhat,
Somewhat. Why wouldn't this be super cheap?
because we're a socialist economy.
And what we were talking about up here, guys, people in socialist economies tend to be members of labor unions, which means you make a higher rate. What about competition? Do you have a lot of competition to deal with?
Not necessarily, no.
So I got to buy what you're selling is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And guys, we oversimplified socialism a little bit. Even in socialist economies, there is going to be some degree of competition. You're not going to necessarily get the customized colors and the satellite radio and the heated seats. You might get a little better than a khaki van, but maybe not much. We are going into khaki territory with our friends in Communist Motors back here. Tell us about your car, guys.
There's only, like, as a customer, you have no choice of what you can get. It's usually only one type of car, and it's outdated, so it's an old car, like, doesn't have, people don't even know that you can have heated seats or heated steering wheel, because the cars are so outdated, and they're all in gray.
Great. Wow, man. So if you can get any color you want as long as it's gray. So we're not talking satellite radio, no heated seats. This thing probably has a manual transmission too, doesn't it? You got to learn how to shift this thing with a terrible clutch. And we have group 4 over here. We got to pick their economic system. What economic system did you go with, and why?
We went with capitalistic system.
And why capitalism?
So we provide a free market choice of the cars for the consumers.
So we got these guys up here making a nice high-end sedan. What are you guys making?
We're gonna go with like a more futuristic approach with like electric cars and tend to like grab the younger consumers.
So we got a group doc here who's going for young, affluent consumers who want to get into electric cars, like Tesla Roadster territory we're talking. Excellent, guys. Guys, go ahead back to your seats. The point in this exercise is to show you the differences in how these economies work. Now, what I gave you is an oversimplification. I am not going to tell you there aren't benefits to socialist economies. There are, particularly if you get sick, if you need health care, if you need child care. But there does tend to be less choice. What I'm about to show you once we get settled back in is what an actual communist car looks like. Brace yourselves, guys, because you have lots of non-options here. This car is called the Trabant. Now, if this car was made in East Germany, between the years of 1950 and 1987. From about 1955 to 1987, guys, this car did not change. What do you notice about this car before I tell you some stories about it? Is this a car that will get your blood pumping to buy? This is a terrible looking car. Do you know what the body is made out of in this car? It's not even aluminum. It's a substance called Duraplast. This car is actually made out of a combination of plastic and cardboard. If you break this car, you can fix it with spackling. If you want to buy this car brand new and you're a member of the Communist Party in East Germany, you can buy one of these cars. You're on a 10 to 15 year waiting list to get to buy one of these cars. This car also has what they refer to as a 2-stroke engine. That means oil and gasoline have to be mixed for the car to be able to run. Therefore, from the time the car is new, it smokes oil every time you run it. It's got a 4-speed manual transmission. I think the horsepower rating was right around 30 horsepower. By means of comparison, most modern motorcycles put out 150 to 200 horsepower at the rear wheel. This car had about 30 to 40 horsepower. And again, when the wall came down between East Germany and West Germany, people were driving these cars into West Germany to reunite the country. And when they broke, they just left them because they were disposable automobiles. This is what a communist car looks like. And just so you guys know, the word Trabant, I would write it down because it almost always shows up as a bonus question on an exam. So the Trabant, T-R-A-B-A-N-T, the Trabant. They did make a station wagon version of it, and it was just as horrible and terrible as this car was. That's what a communist car was. So guys, before we move on, though, because we're having some good conversation here this morning, I'd like to pause for our first question of the day. Sir.
Is China actually a communist country? Because I know they've opened up their economy a lot recently. Is it like more socialist leaning, or is it like a true communist country?
That's a really good question. And when I give you this answer, I'm going to say yes and no. It is and it isn't. Because on one hand, there is a communist regime that definitely runs the country. There are definite social rules. They don't enjoy the kind of mobile freedom that we enjoy in society to be able to say, hey, I want to go to college. I want to create my own life for myself. There is a lot of social direction. At the same time, the middle class is being encouraged to enter free markets. So you might not have had a choice in terms of what profession you went into. But now since you're getting paid, you can walk to the market and buy whatever you want. So it's a hybrid economy. They also have a stock market. So the Hang Seng Index, for example, is their stock market. They're trading stocks. But at the same time, the country's manipulating currency. to try to devalue their own currency to get people to invest in the country. So it is and it isn't. It isn't. It's what we refer to as a mixed economy. It's also called a command economy, which means, for example, there is intervention by the government. It's mixed because it's communist and it's not. It's a very abstract concept. If we had talked about China 20 years ago, I would be saying absolutely it's a communist economy. It's really not a pure communist economy. Any ideas, by the way, your question is excellent. Any ideas why China decided to experiment with a free market? Any ideas? You think what?
They needed to, like, globalization, you know, they wanted to make more profits. The country was having a lot, I know after Chairman Mao took control, China, like, had when they did the Great Leap Forward, where they kind of screwed up their country. So I know they probably wanted to, you know, increase their, income.
Anytime I'd love it when you have students of history in this class, because there's the other part of it too. Let's compare China, who's doing really well. Let's compare them to Cuba. What's the difference in these two countries? Cuba's struggling, and so is North Korea. They don't have free markets. They don't have empowered consumers. They don't have folks who are willing to go out and invest back in their own country because they can't. Even though China, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that China is a wonderful place to live or that they enjoy the freedoms we enjoy, but they do have a growing middle class. In fact, guys, if you were to guess, the largest automobile market in the world, the largest emerging market, is no longer the United States, it's China. The Beijing Auto Show is bigger than the Detroit Auto Show now because companies want to sell cars in China because the middle class can buy them. North Koreans are not experiencing that level of success, and neither are Cubans. So they're basically saying, we know in the long run, communism really isn't going to work in its pure form, so we're going to have to adapt. It's an excellent question. Other questions? Questions or comments? Here's what else is interesting, guys. In terms of the surveillance state of China, they're actually experimenting with get this, guys. China, they're experimenting with your social media status, determining whether or not you can get loans or get interest rates. So could you imagine, for example, how highly people rate you in your transactions with them, how highly people rank you on social media is determining your credit scores. Can you imagine that? How many of you watch Black Mirror? That episode is happening in real time in China. Crazy. All right, guys, let's jump back in. In terms of free market versus command economies, it's a pretty easy distinction to understand. We are a free market economy in the fact that we can buy things when we want. This morning, for example, I had a dispute with Amazon because they charged me too much for something I pre-ordered. I pre-ordered it, got a price guarantee, and the price dropped $5 after I bought it. I contacted Amazon and they credited my account. They do that because they know I can go somewhere else and buy stuff other places, even though they're a very dominant company. If we get into command economies, that means the government is fixing the prices. The government's determining supply and demand. The government is setting all this stuff. Now, guys, in terms of sound economic conditions, free markets are vulnerable. When we went back to 2008, guys, I'll talk about this more than a few times in class because it shaped the world you're growing up in. What happened in the United States that we're still feeling the effects of in 2008? What happened that really undermined our economy? You got it. Do you know what was driving it? Here's what happened, guys. There's a lot of blame to go around. But in 2008, the housing bubble burst. And here's what that means, guys. A lot of people who probably should not have gotten home loans got home loans, and they couldn't pay them. The economy is so driven by home sales in the United States because our homes are our largest investment for Americans. That's our largest source of wealth. Most people, other than their retirement, the largest money investment they have is in their home. All of a sudden, people can't pay their mortgage. What happens to the banks at that point? Yeah, the banks start foreclosing and taking the homes back, except it's not doing any good for the banks because they're not getting revenue. Because here's the thing that most people don't realize. Banks do what with your money, guys? Exactly right. So all of a sudden, the banks are not investing in other things. So all of a sudden, the people who are used to getting investments from those banks are not getting investments. And all of a sudden, the entire economy almost implodes. It was that bad, guys. If we get into the command economies, we get into Russia, before they were a free market economy, so to speak, and Cuba today, and Vietnam, before they started adapting Chinese principles toward capitalism, these countries could not economically make a go of it. So these were real challenges, guys. And then we get into the idea now of China truly being a mixed economy, meaning that China is not pure communism anymore for all the reasons we just discussed. So, guys, how do we know if our country is doing well? I'm not going to ask you to explain it. I just want to know if any of you guys have ever heard the term. Has any of you ever heard the term GDP? Yeah, guys, here's the best way to give you an analogy for GDP. How many pints of blood do we have in the human body? Anybody know? You can give a pint and still be okay. How many pints do we have? It's 8 pints of blood in the human body. So that's an indicator of our health. If we do somebody's checkup and determine all of a sudden you're missing a pint of your blood, what happens? You're probably not running as well, because what does red blood do for the body? Oh, basic phys ed. Come on, guys. What does red blood do? It carries oxygen. So if you got a good red blood cell count, your body can do more. You can be more athletic. I got a lot of performance athletes in here. You guys know this stuff. Our GDP is a measure of how much blood is moving through our economy. So if we have a strong GDP, if we have more money going through our economy, if we have a higher gross domestic product, that means we're in a good place. And if our GDP is expanding, it means the economy is growing. It's good stuff. Gross output simply means how much are we selling of all of these things? How many cars are we selling? How many homes are we selling? All this contributes to the GDP. So in terms of GDP, and this is even a dated statistic, guys, our GDP right now in the United States is right on the crest, or probably a little over $20 trillion, guys. Check that out. By the way, a couple of companies in the United States have crossed the $1 trillion threshold in terms of valuation. Who's one of those companies? Amazon. They're a $1 trillion company. You guys, I don't know if you saw this or not, in about 15 seconds or 15 minutes yesterday, Jeff Bezos made something like $150 billion because of the valuation of Amazon stock going up. That's how well they're doing. We're talking about a heavy-duty GDP. Who's the number 2 GDP in the planet right now? I'm sorry? Not by companies, by countries. That'd be a good guess. China is number 2. They leapfrogged Japan about 10 years ago, and they're coming in at 11 or 12 trillion. So we're talking heavy-duty GDP here, guys. And right now, again, these are 2016 statistics. China's closer to 12 to 13 trillion at this point. They're catching up with us, guys. Here's another idea of how we can tell how our economy is doing. Who here in this room can tell me what the current unemployment rate is in the United States? 4%. What does that say about your status as a soon-to-be college graduate?
Pretty much get a job right after college.
It's a good place to be, man. I wish I had inherited a 4% unemployment rate when I graduated college. You guys are in an employee's market. Guys, it's good stuff. We have the unemployment rate is really a good indicator of how our economy is doing. Check this stuff out, guys. Right now, companies are running out of people to hire. That's a good problem for an economy to have. We have so much work, we can't get enough people to do it. As a result, what's happening? What's happening to wages? They're starting to climb. What else is happening? Companies are offering more benefits. Guys, we have several types of unemployment that factor into this as well, things that we need to be aware of. In fact, let's go on to that. Structural versus cyclical versus seasonal versus frictional. Guys, in terms of structural unemployment, here's what that means. Structural simply means that we are getting, actually we'll cover frictional first, since I have that first in order. Guys, frictional unemployment means people voluntarily leave companies. Is that a good or a bad sign if we have high levels of frictional unemployment? See, we have a vote for bad. Anybody feel different? Could it be a good sign? How is it a good sign?
It's good that, like, the reason that you don't have jobs is that people just aren't getting involved, not because money's not moving through the economy.
Frictional unemployment can actually be a good sign too, because let's say, for example, if you've got people who are leaving and not worrying about it, to go back to your point about 4% unemployment, what might that mean? They believe they can find another job. And by the way, have you guys heard of this term that's coming into vogue right now called ghosting? You guys familiar with the term? Have you heard of it? Here's what it means, guys. The unemployment rate is so low and the economy is so good, people are just not showing up for job interviews or their first day of work. They're not saying, I'm not coming in. They're not emailing. They're not calling. They're just not showing up because they get a better offer somewhere else. Why is that a bad thing to do? In addition to it being rude, why is it a bad thing to do?
Competition.
Well, competition for sure. And is there a chance? Yes. Totally. The markets are big, but they ain't that big. Sooner or later, somebody's going to say, oh, that Tonkin guy. Yeah, I know him. He talks too much. He thinks he's funnier than he is, and he doesn't show up for job interviews. Don't hire that guy. Screw that guy. So 4% unemployment, I might still be getting work. When the unemployment rate goes back up to 12, I might not be in a good place. So be careful with that stuff. Structural means that we have to eliminate jobs for one reason or another. The company is changing. We're automating. We no longer need your position. So the structure of the company has changed. We're getting rid of you. That can be good or bad. Automation is a part of life. It's not so good if you're the person being made obsolete. Then we get into what we refer to as cyclical unemployment. That means, for example, the markets have adjusted. Right now, we're in a bull market, guys. By the way, does anybody know the difference between a bull and a bear market? Have you heard those terms? What's the difference? Yes? You got it. Bulls charge. Bulls believe we're going to make lots of money. Bears hunker down for the long haul. You guys are in the longest running bull market in the history of the markets in the United States. Sooner or later, the bull market's going to stop. And sooner or later, we're going to have cyclical unemployment come back up, which means sometimes companies close because we were operating with too many people in the first place. And then we get seasonal unemployment. If you're somebody who cuts grass for a living, when the snow starts flying, unless you shovel snow, you might get laid off. Same deal for people who work in the mall at Christmas time. January rolls around, the after Christmas sales are over, and your time is done. Let's talk a little bit about the unemployment rate, guys. Is the unemployment rate an accurate measure of how well we're doing? It's a tricky question to answer. Yes. It's true. Do you know why? Oh, that's a really good answer. But what Brady's point is, let's say, for example, all of us were part of the labor force, and we go through a recession, and we have 10% of us can't find jobs. Well, we get back in the workforce. Now we're getting jobs again. Well, I was making $200,000 as a CEO of a startup. Now I'm making $35,000 as a manager at McDonald's. Technically, I'm not unemployed. I have a full-time job. I come off the unemployment rolls, but I'm not making what I made before. We're seeing some of that still from 2008. Here's one of the other parts too, guys. There are two things to be concerned with. Write this down. There's the unemployment rate, and there's the labor force participation rate. Here's what the unemployment rate means. Out of everybody who's trying to get a job, what percentage of people can't get a job? That's the unemployment rate. So out of every 100 people who tries to get a job, 4 people can't. That's considered 4% unemployment. What that rate does not account for is how many people have given up and said, I'm no longer trying. Right now, that's called our labor force participation rate. Can anybody guess, in the United States, 2020, what is our labor force participation rate? Any guess? Yeah. It's higher. It's higher. It's a good guess because of the recession we went through. It's a good bit higher. Anybody else have a guess? Yes? Almost there. We're about 65%. That means we got 35% of the population who could work, who chooses not to for many reasons. What might be a reason that somebody chooses not to work? Is there disability? Is there another reason? Yes? Stay-at-home parent. By the way, we're seeing males and females in that role now. And then we've got other people who have become so disenfranchised, they're basically saying, I give up, I'm no longer trying. We have the lowest labor force participation rate that we've had in about 30 years. That's not good. And it means the companies need to come up with ways to get that remaining 35% to say we want to come back to the workforce if we want to succeed. In terms of the best places to get a job, according to our textbook, these are the big growing cities in the United States, whether it's Charlotte, North Carolina, Grand Rapids, Michigan, as opposed to Youngstown, Ohio, places that are part of what we refer to as the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is where we used to have big, heavy industry, and it went away for one reason or another. However, there's one Rust Belt city that you don't see on that list that's very close to us. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has reinvented itself as a technology powerhouse, and it's one of the top cities for young people to live in. It's a great place to consider at this point in time. Guys, we're going to hit a couple other key indicators here so you understand how we know how the economy is doing. You guys hear it on the news all the time. I'm going to say a word, and I'm going to ask you if it's negative or positive or negative. The word is inflation. How many of you have a negative feeling around the word inflation? Okay. How many of you have a positive feeling around the word inflation? How many of you have not yet raised your hands? It's okay to not know, because the answer is it's both. When we have inflation, that simply means the price of things goes up over time. That's not bad. It's nature, man. If we think about what we're paying for cars these days, a new Mustang in 1968 cost about $2,500. Can you imagine that? $2,500 for a brand new car? What's a new Mustang, a base model, go for these days? Literally around $25,000. So we're talking a tenfold increase in price. Now the wages of individuals haven't kept up with inflation, which is a problem. But prices go up over time. Here's the other thing, too, guys. Right now, let's do this math, because you're going to be doing this in economics anyway. We have a 4% unemployment rate. You guys are entering the workforce, so our employer is going to be paying more or less for you. You're going to be paying more because it's an employee's market. So if we have to pay you more, what do we have to do with our goods and services? You got to raise the price, man. So inflation comes from things like wages increasing, so a good economy actually can drive inflation. Then we have something we refer to called disinflation. That means the rate of price increases is slowing down. Prices are still going up, but at a slower rate. That means our economy is starting to slow. Then we have something called deflation. And that means not good. Prices are going down. Not good for people trying to sell stuff. And then we get into a really weird situation where it's called stagflation. This is the 1980s, guys. And this is a terrible situation to be in. It means the economy is slowing down, but prices are going up. Guys, that can mean a lot of different things. It means we could be in a trade war. It means we could be in a bad situation with our companies and manufacturing. It means people are making less money, but they're paying more for things. Bad place to be, guys. We're going to talk about the economic systems exercise on Monday, but very quickly, guys, in terms of other things that tell us how our economy is doing, we have a consumer price index, which means basically how much are people paying for basic goods and services. What are you paying for a gallon of milk? What are you paying for a gallon of gas, etc.? And then we get into what we refer to as a producer price index, which means for companies that are producing things, what are they paying? Guys, that's good for today. If you came in late, come see me.